Blood still dripped from Einar's blade as he staggered across the battlefield. The smell of iron and smoke filled the air, and the screams of his fallen comrades echoed in his mind. He had fought bravely, but he knew this was his end. A final blow, deep and true, knocked him to his knees. Einar's vision faded as he whispered a final prayer to Odin. When he opened his eyes, he expected to find the great hall of Valhalla filled with warriors drinking and celebrating alongside the gods. Instead, what he saw was a landscape of mist and silence. The grey sky seemed to press closer to the horizon, and the ground was covered in dry leaves and broken branches. He walked slowly, calling out to Odin, Thor, or any god who could hear him, but there was no answer. In the distance, a hooded figure emerged from the mist. Einar raised his sword, still instinctively on guard, but the figure raised a hand in a gesture of peace. Einar, son of Bjorn, welcome to the remaining lands of Valhalla. The voice was deep and filled with sorrow. As he approached, Einar realized that the man was a skald, a warrior poet. His eyes glowed with fire and held the wisdom of ages. "Who are you?" Einar asked. "And why is Valhalla like this? Where are the gods?" The skald introduced himself as Skaldi, a storyteller who had been called into existence by the very fabric of fate to guide the few who could still save the world. "The gods have fallen, Einar," Skaldi said. "Ragnarok has come, as was foretold, but something has gone wrong. The cycle has not been completed. The mortal world and the 9 realms are on the brink of disappearing. You were brought here because your soul still carries the flame of a true warrior." Einar was unsure whether to believe it, but something inside him urged him to listen. Skaldi explained that Valhalla's great hall was destroyed, its warriors scattered like purposeless specters. The tree of life Yggdrasil was dying, and the balance of the cosmos had been thrown off balance. "What do you expect me to do?" Einar asked, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "You must seek answers in the far reaches of Valhalla," Skaldi replied. "There you will find the truth about what happened to the gods, and perhaps a way to restore destiny." Though hesitant, Einar knew he had no choice. He set out, guided by Skaldi's stories and cryptic advice. Along the way he encountered the specters of ancient warriors, translucent, mournful figures who whispered fragments of memories of Ragnarok. Each step brought him closer to a truth that seemed worse than he could bear. At the end of the first day of his journey, Einar reached the doors of Odin's great hall. They were broken, the symbols of power worn and covered in soot. As he walked through the doors, he found the hall empty. The tables were broken, the chalices had fallen, and Odin's throne was empty, with only a dead raven at its feet. "What fate is this?" Einar muttered. Before he could react, a colossal shadow appeared behind him. It was a Draugr, an undead warrior, its eyes glowing a dark blue. Einar raised his sword and faced the creature, realizing that his journey would not only be one of discovery, but also of terrible battles. With one precise blow, Einar defeated the Draugr, but he felt that this was only the first of many trials. As he wiped the sweat and blood from his face, Skaldi appeared again, this time more somber. "This is only the tip of the iceberg, Einar. You have been called not only to seek answers, but to face what the gods themselves could not." The young warrior looked out over the grey horizon of Valhalla, understanding that his journey would be more than a search for answers. It would be a test of his faith, courage, and will to fight for a world that was perhaps already lost. Einar advanced through the dark lands of Valhalla, each step taking him further from what he knew and closer to the unknown. The echoes of the battle against the Draugr still echoed in his mind, but there was no time for hesitation. Skaldi guided him, speaking in riddles about a greater destiny. "Valhalla is dying because Yggdrasil is dying," the skald explained as they walked. "The roots of the tree of life have been severed, and without them, the balance of the 9 realms has been destroyed." Einar looked to the horizon and saw what was left of Yggdrasil. The great tree, once immense and luminous, was now withered, its branches twisting like claws in the grey sky. Each step toward it made the air grow heavier, as if an invisible force was draining its energy. "Who would do this? Who would dare harm the tree of life?" Einar asked. Skaldi remained silent, but the grave look on his face made it clear that he knew more than he was saying. As they approached Yggdrasil, Einar began to notice shadowy figures in the distance. They were spectres of the warriors who had once been chosen by the gods to inhabit Valhalla. They wandered aimlessly, muttering incoherent words about the fall of the gods and the coming of something worse. One of these spectres, an ancient king named Sigurd, approached Einar. "You should not be here, mortal," the spectre said, his voice sounding like it came from an abyss. "Valhalla is no longer a sanctuary." Einar tried to question him, but the spectre vanished before he could answer. When he reached the roots of Yggdrasil, Einar found something unexpected, a broken runic dagger buried deep in the ground. The runes engraved on it glowed faintly, as if they had lost most of their power. "This dagger is part of the Gjallarhorn," Skaldi said, his voice deep. Einar frowned, remembering the stories. The Gjallarhorn was Heimdall's mighty horn, used to herald Ragnarok. If it had been destroyed, it meant that the final events of Ragnarok had not unfolded as they were supposed to. "Why are you here?" Einar asked. "Because someone broke the cycle," Skaldi replied, "and now fate is out of control. This dagger is a fragment of the power needed to restore balance, but for it to work, you will need to find the lost runes and rekindle the spirit of Yggdrasil." Before Einar could react, the ground began to shake. Hideous creatures emerged from the shadows. Draugr, but this time in greater numbers. They were misshapen, their eyes glowing blue, their bodies covered in dark runes. Einar prepared for battle, brandishing his sword and the broken rune dagger. The fighting was fierce, the Draugr charging like a black tide. Einar cut them down one after another, but they kept coming, as if they were endless. Just as his strength began to fail, the dagger in his hand glowed with unexpected power. The runes flared briefly, and a burst of light drove the Draugr away. Einar fell to his knees, exhausted but alive. "Do you see, Einar?" Skaldi said urgently. "The dagger still holds a fraction of the Gjallarhorn's power, but if you do not find all the runes, it will be useless." Einar looked at the dagger in his hand, feeling the weight of his mission growing. "Where should I go now?" he asked breathlessly. Skaldi pointed to a path that led even deeper into the wastelands of Valhalla. "The runes are scattered throughout the darkest places of this realm, but be careful, Einar. The closer you get to reviving Yggdrasil, the more enemies will emerge, and not all of them will be like the Draugr." Einar nodded, steadying himself. "No matter what comes, I will fulfill my mission." With the dagger in hand and renewed determination, Einar advanced along the indicated path, knowing that his journey was only just beginning. The shadow of Yggdrasil loomed over him, a constant reminder that the fate of the 9 realms now depended on his courage and strength. Einar advanced through the dark lands of Valhalla, following the path Skaldi had shown him. Each step took him deeper into a forgotten land, where time seemed to stand still and the air grew heavier. The rune dagger, now glowing faintly with the runes he had activated, pulsed like a beacon of hope, but also a reminder of the responsibility he bore. Skaldi had warned him of his next challenge. He must seek the place where Fenrir, the monstrous wolf that had devoured Odin during Ragnarok, was imprisoned. Though the beast had not been destroyed, its power was sealed by mystical chains that prevented it from wreaking more chaos. Upon reaching Fenrir's former prison, Einar found himself faced with a devastating sight. Giant rocks covered the ground, forming a deep cavern. In the center, Fenrir's massive body was wrapped in golden chains that glowed with magical runes. The wolf was larger than any creature Einar had ever seen, with eyes like burning flames and heavy breathing that made the ground shake. Fenrir lifted his head as he sensed Einar's presence and growled, his voice reverberating through the cave. "Who dares set foot in this place?" "I am Einar, son of Bjorn. I have come to seek the answers the gods left behind and to restore balance to the 9 realms." Fenrir laughed, a low, menacing sound. "The gods have failed, mortal. They imprisoned me, but they could not prevent the end of your own existence. Now you, a mere soul, believe you can fix what they have destroyed." Einar felt doubt creep into his mind, but he pushed it away. He knew his mission was greater than his fears. "Perhaps the gods have failed, but that does not mean the world must perish. Tell me what you know of the fate of Yggdrasil and Ragnarok." Fenrir regarded Einar for a long moment, his eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "Fate has been interrupted, warrior," the wolf said. "The gods were meant to fall, and the world was meant to rise from the ashes. But something has stopped the cycle. Someone severed the roots of Yggdrasil to prevent the rebirth from happening." "So who did this?" Einar asked, but Fenrir just shook his head. "That doesn't matter now. What matters is that the power needed to restore the cycle lies within my chains. They were forged with the power of the gods, and if freed, they can help you reactivate the Tree of Life." Einar sensed the trap in Fenrir's words. Freeing the wolf would mean freeing one of the most destructive beings in the cosmos. "And if I free you, what guarantees do I have that you won't bring more chaos?" Fenrir smiled, baring his sharp fangs. "There are no guarantees, mortal, but you have no choice. Without my power, your mission is doomed to failure." Einar pondered for a moment. He knew that freeing Fenrir would be risky, but the only other alternative would be failure. Finally, he made his decision. "I will not free you, but I can use the power in your chains in another way." Fenrir growled, but Einar was already moving. He raised the runic dagger and began to recite words that echoed in his mind as if whispered by the gods themselves. The golden chains began to glow brightly, and the power within them flowed into the dagger. Fenrir howled in agony and fury, but Einar pressed on until the runes on the dagger ignited fully, transforming it into a pulsing artifact of divine energy. "You have made your choice, mortal," Fenrir said, his voice thick with menace. "But remember this, there is no victory without sacrifice." With the power of the chains now sealed within the dagger, Einar left the cave feeling the weight of Fenrir's words in his mind. He knew that the journey was far from over, and that each choice brought him closer to a destiny he could barely comprehend. Outside, Skadi waited, his expression grave. "Have you succeeded?" the Skald asked. Einar raised his dagger, which now glowed with golden light. "Yes, but I sensed the price was high." Skadi nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "The price is always high, Einar, but now you are closer to restoring the cycle. Prepare yourself, for the next step will be even more challenging." Einar looked to the horizon, where the shadow of Yggdrasil still dominated the sky. He knew the hardest battles were yet to come. With his runic dagger now imbued with the power of Fenrir's chains, Einar advanced towards the heart of Yggdrasil. The horizon was dominated by the colossal shadow of the Tree of Life, its dry, twisted branches seeming to pierce the grey sky. The air around it was thick and pulsed with an ominous energy, as if the world itself were trapped in an eternal limbo. Beside Einar, Skadi walked in silence, his expression more somber than ever. "Do you feel it?" the Skald asked. "The corruption. It comes from something ancient, something that even the gods feared." Einar nodded. He could feel the presence of something powerful, like an invisible weight pressing down on his shoulders. Finally, they reached the core of Yggdrasil. The heart of the Tree of Life was a vast, open space, surrounded by gigantic roots that twined around each other like serpents. In the center, a colossal creature was coiled within the roots. It was Nidhogg, the dragon that had devoured the roots of Yggdrasil since the beginning of time. But Nidhogg no longer seemed like a passive devourer. He had grown larger, his eyes glowing with an evil red light, and his scales were covered in black runes. He had absorbed the corruption that had severed the roots of Yggdrasil, becoming a destructive force beyond imagination. Upon noticing Einar and Skadi, the dragon raised its head and roared, the vibrations echoing throughout the space. "You are the mortal who carries the power of the fallen gods," Nidhogg said, his voice deep and reverberating. "Have you come to stop me, or to kneel before true power?" Einar stepped forward, his runic dagger in his hand. "I do not kneel before monsters," he replied. "Are you the cause of Yggdrasil's death?" Nidhogg. "If it is power you desire, then see what I wield," Einar shouted, raising his runic dagger. The dagger's golden light exploded into the air, cutting through the darkness around him. Nidhogg roared in defiance, and the battle began. The final battle. Nidhogg lunged at Einar with terrifying speed, his claws tearing the ground around him. Einar rolled to the side, dodging the attack, and counterattacked with a swift slash of his dagger. The runic blade flashed as it struck the dragon's scales, searing it with divine energy. The creature screamed in pain, but did not retreat. With a swift movement, its colossal tail struck Einar, slamming him against one of Yggdrasil's roots. The impact left the warrior gasping, but he rose, determined to continue. Skadi watched from a distance, chanting ancient verses that seemed to strengthen Einar. "Remember, Einar," Skadi shouted. "The power of the Gjallarhorn is in the dagger. Use it to reactivate the roots." Einar understood. He could not defeat Nidhogg with brute force alone. He needed to restore Yggdrasil while he faced the dragon. During the battle, Einar found moments to plunge the dagger into several roots, around the heart of Yggdrasil. Each time he did so, a golden light coursed through the roots as if new life were being injected into the tree. Nidhogg realized what Einar was doing and became even more ferocious. He released black flames that burned the ground around him, but Einar kept fighting. With a final strike, he plunged the dagger straight into the heart of the Tree of Life. The final sacrifice. A wave of divine energy exploded from Yggdrasil, engulfing all space. Nidhogg roared in pain, his body beginning to disintegrate as the power of the tree consumed him. But Einar was also struck by the energy. He felt his body weaken, as if his essence were being absorbed by the tree. He looked at Skadi, who now seemed more like a spirit than a man. "This is the price, Einar," Skadi said sadly. "To restore the cycle, a sacrifice is necessary." Einar closed his eyes, accepting his fate. He knew that his life was a small price to pay for the rebirth of the Nine Realms. As his energy flowed into Yggdrasil, the roots began to grow again, the branches began to spread, and light returned to the cosmos. Nidhogg was destroyed, and the corruption was cleansed. The rebirth of Valhalla. When it was all over, Einar was no more. His essence had become part of Yggdrasil, ensuring that the cycle of fate would be restored. The Nine Realms began to be reborn, and Valhalla once again became a place of glory and celebration. The specters of ancient warriors found peace, and balance was finally restored. In the days that followed, Einar's name was celebrated as the Last Warrior of Valhalla, the one who sacrificed everything to save the cosmos. Skadi, now an immortal spirit, traveled the realms, singing Einar's story so that it would never be forgotten. Thus ended the journey of the Last Warrior of Valhalla, whose deeds would echo forever in the sagas of men and gods.